Hello, I am the Script Monk, and welcome to part 3 in my series on myth and the movies. Last time we looked at the universal motif of the quest as popularized by Joseph Campbell. Campbell saw the quest as mythological renditions of the cycles of death and rebirth that we all go through as we grow, change, progress in life. Now, I know you might be thinking, oh, I already know about the hero's journey. I read that book and I saw that video and I went to that website. First of all, it's not called the hero's journey. The hero's journey is the name made up by the hacks who gutted Campbell's work and turned it into a sterile story formula. Second of all, you don't know jack until you know that Campbell's work originated from one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century, psychologist and successor to Sigmund Freud, Dr. Carl Jung. In fact, Campbell was inspired to investigate the quest myth because Jung kinda did it first. But Jung wasn't interested in stories per se, as he was the deep well of human unconscious that produced them. Jung probed the darkest corners of the human psyche and produced an extremely unique theory on the origin of mythical stories, one that implies, whether you believe it or not, that the stories you experience in movie theaters today are so primordial that they date back well before the beginnings of human civilization. So in this video, I'm taking things to the HNL. Dr. Jung is going to show you how every movie hero and monster, every love story and battle, wells up from the dark waters of the human soul. So grab that red pill, guys. We're going to see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Just as a side note, his name is pronounced Jung, not Young. But I'm probably gonna keep calling him Jung throughout this video because I just can't help it. It's like this lit theory class I had once when they insisted that we keep calling Walter Benjamin Walter Benjamin. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. Dr. Carl Gustav Jung is best known for his theory on the collective unconscious. But along with being his most well-known idea, it's also his most misunderstood. Contrary to a lot of first impressions, the collective unconscious isn't some Borg hive mind concept or some magical place our minds go when we dream or some stupid crap like that. It's actually founded on what are now well-established scientific ideas. Only that these ideas weren't well-developed during Jung's time, forcing him to rely on a lot of creative metaphors. Plus, it doesn't help that a lot of time, Jung just sounds like he's on dope.
Whoa, just like dig this, man. Like totality and unity stand at the highest points of objective values because their symbols can't be distinguished from the God image, man. So like all statements about the God image also imply the empirical symbols of totality. It's freaking me out, man.
Acid trips aside, Jung was greatly inspired by contemporary ideas on genetic evolution. Namely the idea that a creature's genetic inheritance determined not only its physical characteristics, but to an extent its behavioral characteristics as well. This is most obvious in the area of instincts, the way creatures automatically exhibit certain behaviors from birth. Jung saw no reason not to extend this to human beings. Just as pigeons all know how to act like pigeons and squirrels to run around like squirrels, human beings all exhibit a fundamental sameness of mind, which could have only evolved along with all our other traits. In other words, Jung believed that deep down, we are all psychologically identical. To use the standard iceberg metaphor, while the surface of our psyche is unique and individual, deep below the waterline lies unconscious structures that we all share. These structures are called collective because we all have them. This is basically our programming for how to be human. But like buggy game code, there's a lot of ghosts in that machine. These ghosts routinely rise up into the personal unconscious and are transformed into symbolic images and actions when we dream. Yet when Jung analyzed the dreams of his patients, he discovered a very curious thing. The same types of images occurred again and again and again. Jung called these repeated images archetypes. These archetypes occur so frequently in dreams that Jung theorized that over the millions of years, humanity evolved not only an identical psychic structure, but identical ways of representing the forces of this structure in our dreams, in our visions, in our hallucinations. In Jung's words, archetypes are the ancient riverbeds along which our psychic current naturally flows, creating a code of sorts by which our primordial impulses are expressed. More interestingly, Jung noticed how these archetypes also made up the standard repertoire of world mythologies. In fact, the parallels between dream and myth are uncanny. In a previous video, I said that myths can be considered the dreams of an entire society. Jung took to this notion literally. But it's not that people dream in myths, it's that people myth in dreams. The common assumption about the way myths are created was that primitive people saw a natural phenomena and then invented a story to explain it. We can call this the pragmatic approach. But if myth is supposed to be so pragmatic, then why is so much of it so damn weird? I mean, couldn't they have come up with a simpler explanation? Plus, there are a ton of bizarre myths that don't seem to explain anything. But Jung's theory justifies the weird by inverting our assumptions about the way myths are created. Instead of explaining nature through a strange story, myths explain a strange story through nature. See, to Jung, myths are second-hand psychic experiences. Myths take the strange and disturbing encounters in our unconscious and transposes them onto nature or society in a way that seems to make sense. See, as Jung states, all the mythologized processes of nature are really just symbolic expressions of the inner unconscious drama of the psyche, which only become accessible to man's consciousness by the way of projection. That is, it must be mirrored somehow in the events of nature. So all the gods and monsters of myth and folklore are really just projections in the collective unconscious, reinterpreted, reshaped, and dressed up according to local cultural ideas. Jung's theory thus provides an answer to the great mystery of comparative mythology. Since all people share the same collective unconscious, they all experience the same archetypes. Since we all undergo similar psychic experiences, then it's only natural that our mythologies will have a lot of similarities. But we're not here to talk about ancient mythologies, we're here to talk about modern movies. But in modern Hollywood movies, nothing really has changed. We still see the same archetypal dramas played out again and again and again. So what are these dramas and why do they keep reoccurring? Well, Jung has an answer for that as well. At the foundation of Jung's brand of analytical psychology is the idea that every human psyche must undergo two major life adventures, and both of these adventures have counterparts in our storytelling. The first of these life journeys is called ego differentiation. When a child is born, it is undifferentiated. That means it has no sense of identity and can't even tell where it ends and the world around it begins. But as the child grows, the ego, Latin for I am, emerges, and the child begins to perceive itself as an individual, a distinct and unique personality separate from everything around it. This adventure of self-discovery continues until the individual no longer needs their parents and becomes an independent, self-sufficient member of society. It's not difficult to see how children's movies are all about ego differentiation. Time and again, a young hero is tossed into a terrifying adventure where they must make sense of the world and themselves, overcome illusions of childhood, and stand on their own 2 feet. Along the way, the hero might acquire symbolic companions, battle fears in the forms of monsters, or escape the grip of tyrannical parental figures. See, children love these stories because unbeknownst to them, the external adventure relates to their own internal journey. But ego differentiation comes at a price. In the process of being molded by society with its rules of thou shalt and thou shalt not, vital aspects of the self are fractured, repressed, or lost. Thus, at an important point in the adult's life, they grow restless. Ha ha! The title of this video wasn't just a stupid pun. Ha! With this feeling of restlessness, the archetypes invade one's dreams, marking the summons to life's second adventure, which Jung calls individuation. Individuation is a process whereby the ego must re-establish contact and subsequently reintegrate the lost parts of self, so the self may be whole once more. And it's interesting that Jung describes this in a way that sounds a lot like the Hollywood plot formula. He says its beginning is almost invariably characterized by one's getting stuck in a blind alley or some impossible situation. And the goal is illumination or higher consciousness, by means of which the initial situation is overcome on a higher level. Joseph Campbell noticed the inherent storiness of this too, and in Here with a Thousand Faces, he masterfully associates the various stages of the quest myth with Jung's process of individuation. The first archetype encountered is usually the herald, who issues the call to adventure. But the ego, which story associates with a hero, may be reluctant, fearful, or confused. This requires an encounter with another archetype, the wise old man. The wise old man is an archetype of objective reason. He appears in dreams whenever the ego hero needs someone to point the way and provide courage for the next step. But when the myth hero does cross the threshold to adventure, to enter the dark woods, the mysterious mountains, the world of supernatural wonder, know that this is in reality symbolic terrain. The hero is not actually journeying outward, but inward into the world of their own unconscious. But the unconscious is a strange and treacherous place. In every psyche, there are puzzles to be solved, bizarre figures to encounter, and monsters to be slain if the ego hero is to achieve the goal of its quest. Come on, John, fight those demons. You can do it. It's not long before the hero encounters the archetype of the shadow. Located in the personal unconscious, the shadow is the personification of the secret, hidden parts of the personality, made up of everything that was repressed, ignored, or rejected during ego differentiation. Out of the need to square oneself with society, the ego banished these traits to the unconscious. But the shadow need not be entirely negative. It might also contain positive aspects that were repressed during socialization. But the ego can't afford to ignore this side of the personality. One can't run away from their own shadow, and therefore the shadow will continue to lurk behind conscious behaviors. So the shadow must be acknowledged, confronted, and brought into balance. One need not look far to find examples of the shadow archetype in Hollywood movies. The shadow often takes the form of some sort of rival or opponent to the hero, quite similar to the hero in some ways, but clearly opposite in others.
I am a shadowy reflection of you. It'll take only a nudge to make you like me.
Alternatively, the shadow can appear as a mysterious rogue whose antisocial qualities give advantages that the hero doesn't have. In simplistic narratives, we see only the negative side of the shadow. The hero's task then is merely to subdue this character's excesses. If the shadow is also the story's villain, this confrontation may compose the entire drama. But if the shadow demonstrates both positive and negative traits, the hero will often win the support of the shadow, gaining a powerful but unpredictable ally. But keep in mind, this is all symbolism. Psychoanalytically speaking, the hero and the shadow are but two aspects of the same person, like how Bruce Wayne is also the Batman. Indeed, 2005's Batman Begins is an excellent allegory of a man who learns to recognize and find balance with his shadow.
This plurality of self becomes even more significant when we run to the second crucial archetype, located even deeper in the unconscious, what Jung called the anima or animus. And once we understand this archetype, we get a whole new take on all those romantic subplots found in practically every Hollywood movie. Anima is Latin for soul, but it's not really a soul in the traditional sense. To be honest, I have a hard time making a lot of sense out of Jung's anima animus, but it's chiefly regarded as the missing yin to the ego's yang. It's a counterpart with matching opposites. As such, among other things, the anima is considered to be the hidden feminine aspects of the male psyche, and the animus, the masculine aspects of the female psyche. Now, the logic behind this is based on the belief that gender differentiation doesn't occur in the minds of children until about the age of 3 or 4. And at this point, a potential part of self with all of its possibilities is lost, and these two must be reintegrated for individuation to occur. Thus, in dreams, the anima appears in its positive aspects as a beautiful young woman, or some kind of witch, harpy, or succubus in its negative aspects. Likewise, the animus appears in masculine forms, which Jung ranges from the brutish Tarzan to the godly Hermes. As a side note, this male-female interpretation of the anima animus is a bit dubious, not to mention overtly heteronormative. But keep in mind that the form archetypes take is always determined by the mind of the dreamer. Therefore, the anima or animus need not appear as male or female, need not even be human. They're in fact a wealth of symbolic possibilities that stories can exploit. But in its traditional form, this archetype explains why tales with male heroes always have their princesses to be rescued, their queens to beguile, or their encounters with nymphs, mermaids, or other feminine spirits. Likewise, tales with female heroes always have their prince charmings, their arrogant young rogues, or their brave woodsmen.
This is the woodsman right here, folks!
But one must not mistake this motif for meaningless romances. Just like the shadow, the hero and the anima or animus are not two separate individuals, but two parts of the same whole. Since individuation demands that all parts of the self be reintegrated, a reunion with the anima or animus is an essential part of the hero's quest. Romance is simply the means by which this reunion is typically symbolized. This of course sheds new light on all those Hollywood stories about rough, tough, masculine protagonists who only succeed after first attaining the love and support of a special female character. While this is too often tacked on the plot, this love interest isn't just some additional character. She represents the lost half of the hero's soul, the feminine to his masculine, and vice versa for stories with female protagonists. In mythical terms, the romantic union is actually essential for the hero to achieve its quest. However, we need mention how problematic this archetype can become on the surface level of story discourse, because far too often the anima character is reduced to a mere object to be won by the male hero, or even worse, a reward given to him for his deeds. Even when this is not the case, the anima character often receives far less character development and personal agency, resulting in highly imbalanced depictions of gender. Now, Hollywood has been forced to finally reckon with these issues in the last few years, but they've been bumbling around like a bull in a china shop for a solution. Perhaps the answer lies in a recognition of the inherent duality of mythical narrative, where all things must be balanced and equal. But that's a topic for another video. But back to the quest. Once the shadow has been tamed and reunion achieved with the anima or animus, we enter the final stages of the quest. The hero now has the strength to battle the toughest demons in their soul, but there is one encounter remaining. A meeting with the archetype of the self itself. Jung doesn't give much on how this archetype manifests, probably because few people actually get to this stage of individuation. But most movies contain a late moment in which the hero encounters a final instance of fear or self-doubt. This is inevitably overcome when the hero becomes willing to surrender all of themselves, everything they once possessed or care about, including their own lives, to accomplish the final goal. In Jungian terms, the hero willingly annihilates their ego, which is the final stage in individuation. With this symbolic death, the self is reborn, a united whole once more. Campbell called this phase apotheosis, with the hero literally transcending into a divine being. Most movies, of course, don't go this far, but rather conclude with some great achievement which symbolizes the hero's mastery over their world. But enough of all these bits and pieces. Let's see how a Jungian myth plays out in an actual movie from beginning to end. And for this, we enter The Matrix. The Matrix is a conscious myth. By that I mean the Wachowskis are so well versed in theory and philosophy that they intentionally designed the Matrix as an illustration of, among many other things, the Jungian archetypes. While this went overboard in the sequels, showing the metaphorical limitations of a Hollywood genre film, the first installment keeps things simple, with a clear, well-structured myth of individuation. In The Matrix, we meet Thomas Anderson, a young man disenchanted with his adult life in his modern adult world. In response, Thomas has created the alter ego Neo, a fantasy self that represents all Thomas wants to be, but what society will not allow. Thus, Thomas Anderson is the ego, Neo is the shadow. But Thomas's psyche is also haunted by demons, bureaucratic demons who look very much like his boss at work. Thus, we can surmise that our restless hero is unsatisfied with the soulless bureaucratic society that adulthood has forced him into and yearns for his freedom. Thus summons the archetypes of his living dreams. First comes the Herald, who calls Thomas to his journey of individuation. In need of guidance, the Herald leads our heroes to the wise old man. The old man points out a path and gives the hero a choice. The hero willingly steps over the threshold of consciousness and is sent tumbling into the dark waters Jung associates with the unconscious. Lost in this strange world, the hero has only a collection of archetypes to guide him. The old man once more points the way to the first goal, integration with the shadow. Thomas Anderson and Neo must become one. Where the old man's intellectual reasoning fails, it is compensated by another Jungian archetype, the mother, an archetype of intuitive wisdom that surpasses conscious reason. Yet an archetype need not be fully contained in a single character, nor is a single character prohibited from performing the functions of more than one archetype. Thus, while the alter ego Neo represents the positive aspects of the shadow, in Cypher we find a negative shadow. Cypher is doubt, fear, and anger. He is a Neo who has lost his faith and now prefers self-destruction. Trinity, on the other hand, serves a double role, first as Herald, but more importantly as the story's anima. The Trinity-Neo relationship is no mere romantic sidetrack. Trinity is Neo's second half, the feminine Neo to his masculine. I mean, look at this casting. They could be brother and sister. Let me pause for a second to point out how brilliantly the Wachowskis indicate Trinity's anima connection to Neo. In a late moment that's usually overlooked because there's just so much else going on, Trinity reveals that the Oracle prophesied that she would fall in love with a person who would become the one. Though this might be taken for emotional schmaltz at the big climax, this indicates that Trinity and Neo were fatally linked from the very start. If Neo is indeed the one, then Trinity must fall in love with him. But on Jungian terms, it's impossible for Thomas Anderson to achieve the state of wholeness called the One until he first consummates his bond with the Anima Trinity. So the negative shadow is subdued, Anderson and Neo are fully integrated, and the bond is solidified with the Anima Trinity. Our hero can now battle his subconscious demons, but at the threshold of victory faces an ultimate moment of self-doubt. In this encounter with the question of self, our hero annihilates the all-too-human ego that once was Thomas Anderson, and is reborn the fully integrated One. He has achieved apotheosis and scatters his demons to the winds. Our hero is now fully actualized and has achieved mastery over his world. Now that's how you do a Jungian myth. In these last few videos, I've discussed some of the psychological universals of myth that transcend all time and place. Next time, I'm going to shift gears to the no less important culturally specific aspects of mythic discourse. And by that I mean the way Hollywood movies explicitly address the ideas, values, and beliefs of the society in which we live. First up, we're going to put Joseph Campbell aside to look at the explicitly American monomyth, which explains, among other things, Hollywood's love for vigilante violence. But until then, make sure to subscribe to keep receiving this mythic goodness. I'm the Script Monk. I'll see you later.